And I will do the little, don't forget, we have plenty of festival events. This is part of the Northern Ireland Human Rights Festival. And if you check out NIHRF online, you'll find other events for the rest of today and tomorrow, including a pub quiz tonight at 8 o'clock, which will be free and completely online. So you can just join in from, if you're like me, the comfort of your sofa. Oh, and I posted the link. So thank you so much.
No problem. I think that's us now. Helen, we've 37 in so far, so I can keep an eye on anyone else that's joining.
Brilliant. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. We are going to ask if it's okay if we take a quick picture just in a few minutes' time. So maybe if you're happy enough, have your camera on for that. Otherwise, something I've been made aware of recently is that obviously there's real issues with broadband. So if you don't, it's lovely to see everybody's faces, but if you don't need your video on, or if some people are struggling with bandwidth, we can maybe keep our videos off and also stay on mute. We are recording today's session, so if you don't want to appear, keep your video off. We're going to ask all participants to stay on mute unless they're speaking. If you have any comments or any questions, just as our speakers are talking, feel free to pop it in the chat box there. So we're going to start first, actually. Rachel from WRDA, who is the Women's Sector Lobbyist, is going to introduce the Feminist Recovery Plan first. So the floor is yours, Rachel.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So happy International Human Rights Day as well. So as Helen said, my name is Rachel Paul. Most of you on this call will know me, but I'm the Women's Sector Lobbyist with the Women's Resource and Development Agency, and we coordinate the Women's Policy Group for Northern Ireland. So just to give you a bit of background on the Women's Policy Group and how this Feminist Recovery Plan came about. But basically the Women's Policy Group is kind of a coalition of different women working across a range of organisations in Northern Ireland with a shared interest on how policy and policy making impacts and influences women's rights. So we work together essentially to ensure that the voices of women are being heard when any policy making or budgeting is being done. So the Women's Policy Group in general, it's not just women's organisations. There's a range of women that work in NGOs, human rights organisations, statutory bodies, LGBT groups, trade unions, migrant organisations, and more. But I'll post a link to the Women's Policy Group in the chat so that you can look at what we do in more detail. But from the very beginning of the pandemic, the Women's Policy Group were raising the need for the disproportionate impact of COVID on women to be urgently addressed by our policymakers. We developed so many briefings, policy notes, statements, articles, evidence submissions, but we still weren't seeing any reference to women at all in any of the recovery planning. And the most obvious example of this was when the executive first released their roadmap to recovery and how we were going to move out of the first lockdown. Within this, there was absolutely no reference to women, no reference to childcare, and no acknowledgement of the disproportionate impact the pandemic was having on women. So in Northern Ireland, the pandemic is extremely gendered for a number of reasons. So 79% of our health and social care workers are women. 70% of those ineligible for statutory sick pay are women. Over 80% of part-time workers are women, particularly in the most vulnerable sectors such as retail and hospitality. 91% of lone parents in Northern Ireland are women. So there are a lot of factors to be considered as to why these different decisions that were being made by government were disproportionately impacting women. And without the acknowledgement of this in the recovery planning, the pre-existing inequalities that women felt in Northern Ireland were being exacerbated. So back in July then, we launched the Feminist Recovery Plan. It was written by over 18 organisations. It's a very hefty, comprehensive document. It's 127 pages long, but within that, it is split up into 6 different pillars. So throughout the plan, we provide a wide range of evidence on how women have been impacted across a range of different parts of our society, but also recommendations on what should be done to ensure that there is a gender-sensitive response and to not only mitigate against the impact on women, but to also alleviate those pre-existing inequalities that women face. So today's webinar is now our 6th or 7th in a series where we have been looking at each pillar in more detail. So I'll also post a link to the past webinars, which looked at specific parts of the Feminist Recovery Plan in more detail, alongside briefing notes so that you can get a summary of what was discussed in each one. But I'm absolutely delighted to have the panel that we have with us here today. And it's extremely timely that we do begin to look at Brexit and the impact on women, how a Bill of Rights could potentially alleviate against this risk, and what international mechanisms are at play here as well. So I'll just post everything into the chat, but I'll hand it back over to Helen, who is coordinating today. And thanks as well to the Human Rights Consortium, who's doing this event with us, also as a part of their COVID Conversation series. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rachel. If people want to turn their video on quickly, if they're happy to be included in a photo, Rachel, do you want to take a quick picture? If we maybe Rachel.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to take the first one here because we have quite a few participants. Oh. Bear with me 1 second.
Want me to grab it here?
And here, I'm just going to move to the next page of people. Okay. Okay, that's me. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I should say that this is a crossover event. So we've been running the consortium, along with the TJI and the Equality Coalition, have been running a series called COVID Conversations that were looking at rights issues that existed prior to the pandemic, but had really been intensified, we felt, by the pandemic. And we were always planning to run one specifically around the Bill of Rights and, rights standards in general. But when we also participated in the Feminist Recovery Plan, and when Rachel told us that they were planning to do a webinar series, we just thought, let's combine and let's do a special crossover. And we were so lucky that we were able to get it to fall on International Human Rights Day and also as part of the festival then. So I'm going to just go straight into our speakers because that's why we're all here, let's be honest. So our first speaker is Helena McCormick, who's going to speak to the Bill of Rights. Helena is a former commissioner at the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. That was the statutory body that was tasked by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement with providing advice to the UK government on the content of a Bill of Rights for Northern Ireland. Prior to that, though, Helena has had a long history of campaigning on the Bill of Rights, including as a board member of my own organisation, the Human Rights Consortium. Helena also has particular experience in working with women from grassroots BME communities in Northern Ireland to ensure that their voices are heard at the UN level through the CEDAW mechanism, which is the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So I'm going to pass over to Helena. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Helen. I'm really hoping that my internet holds out for this. I've been having a few difficulties, so please stop me if it's getting bad. But anyway, just to start, I want to say a huge thank you to Helen and to everybody for inviting me. I mean, it is a real privilege, and what a way to celebrate International Human Rights Day, than being here with the consortium. As you say, I have great memories when I was a board member. So I've got 10 minutes. 10 minutes obviously isn't a lot of time to discuss the Bill of Rights. People have spent years discussing this. I certainly know when I was on the working group, the Women's Working Group Bill of Rights, we spent hours at a time in closed rooms discussing this. So 10 minutes isn't a long amount of time. But what I'm going to do is briefly, and I'm going to make no apologies for, I suppose, standing on my soapbox a little bit, is I'm going to talk firstly about why I think it's essential for Northern Ireland to have a Bill of Rights. Secondly, why I think it's essential for women's rights. And thirdly, why it is even more important, or well, it's very important today, particularly in the Brexit kind of COVID landscape that we're in. And I'm going to try and draw upon some of my experience and illustrate what I do think that it could do to change things on the ground. So firstly, and briefly, to address why I think it's essential for Northern Ireland, and I won't spend much time on this point because it's well rehearsed, and I presume that if you're here today, you probably have a good idea of this already. Obviously, the Good Friday Agreement, which 1998, 22 years ago, made a commitment to a Bill of Rights. Now, obviously, it's been debated and discussed at length in many forums, but frustratingly, it hasn't moved forward as much as we would like it to. But the reality is that this has to be done. The government's made a commitment. It's in our peace agreements. People of Northern Ireland voted for this. It's a constitutional imperative. Time has slipped away with little progress, but this is an obligation. And then that brings me to my second point, why I think it is essential for women's rights. Now, there are a lot of reasons why, and obviously the Feminist Recovery Plan document, amazing document, highly extensive. There's so many issues that could go into this in terms of why we need better rights protection for women in particular. But what I want to focus on briefly is the aspect of empowerment. Putting the realization of putting rights into the hands of women and girls. Human rights shouldn't be something that's just for lawyers or academics or those in government. They mean nothing unless they can make a real difference in improving lives at the grassroots and on the ground. Now, Helen, when we were talking last week, reminded me of an excellent piece of work that I was involved with when I worked for NICEM. Now, that organisation doesn't exist anymore. It was the Northern Ireland Council for Ethnic Minorities, and it was an umbrella body for ethnic minority groups in Northern Ireland. Now, we had a women's group that was incredibly diverse, both ethnically, religiously, different socioeconomic backgrounds as well. And what we did, like a lot of other groups, is we developed a shadow report. So we took the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, this international instrument that the UK has signed up to and has an obligation to, again, see that the rights within that convention are fulfilled. We took that and we had structured discussions around the different articles. So we talked about things like discrimination, like no recourse to public funds, poverty, but we discussed them in how they were relevant to women's lives on the ground, and we collated a report. And then we were able to obtain an amount of funding to send a delegation over to Geneva to actually present these findings. And this was incredibly powerful because women, who were experiencing these within their everyday lives were able to go and actually present this to international experts. And just the fact that, it was very powerful for the international experts to hear that from the grassroots level, but equally it was powerful for the women to feel that they were listened to. And I mean, we'd spent a long time going through the CEDAW Convention, looking at where the gaps are in terms of protections within Northern Ireland. So where women's rights were not being fulfilled against the obligations within the convention. And we took that and put that to the committee of experts, who then produced their concluding observations. And it was really powerful, I think, for people to be able to see how their contribution had actually made a difference to what these experts had said. But the thing is, obviously we shouldn't have to go to Geneva to have that realization. This is an obligation that the UK has committed to. So, and I suppose what I'm getting at here is that if we had those obligations within a domestic Bill of Rights, so that if women were facing those issues in their everyday lives, they knew that they could get some sort of recourse here, it would be incredibly powerful. When I was on the Women's Working Group of the Bill of Rights, and this is back in 2007, so a long time ago, but we discussed a great deal the symbolic part of a Bill of Rights. It's something that citizens should be aware of, something that's in the popular narrative and consciousness, and that can be referred to as a cornerstone national document. It's something people are aware of. So when they're facing these challenges, I mean, that's their kind of their something that they're aware of, that the state is going to protect them in some way. And I'm not saying that a Bill of Rights will necessarily solve things immediately overnight. I mean, of course, it requires a lot of investment and a lot of different structures in order to alleviate injustices that have been entrenched for so long. But there is the concept of progressive realization, which is about not everything has to be done at once. We start with this document, and then the government, in conjunction with citizens, makes a plan as to how these rights can be realised. And this, I suppose, brings me then on to my third point, which I think is why I think this is really important today in the Brexit COVID climate. Now, obviously, with the pandemic, it has been a really, really hard time. And as Helen and Rachel have said, I mean, very much the pandemic has brought into sharp focus the disparity and the kind of what women are facing in Northern Ireland. And I mean, some of those statistics, my internet dropped out a little bit, but just that Rachel was outlining are, just really astounding, incredibly stark there in terms of the lack of parity that women are facing. And with Brexit as well, so there's, you know, there is a bit of a sense of hopelessness around the current pandemic, and also with Brexit. You know, I've got 2 small children, and I don't listen to the news in the morning. We listen to Christmas songs on the way to school, but you know, just glancing at my phone this morning, I see there's a lot in the news about Brexit, and that, you know, certainly those within the rights community, it has been quite a kind of a depressing time, for want of a better word. But I do think that a Bill of Rights could, you know, it could address a lot of these issues. I mean, things like the loss of the Charter, things like, you know, parity with certain rights that are in other jurisdictions here. A Bill of Rights could help to fill those gaps at a very practical level. But I think as well, and this gets back to the point around empowerment, it would give people a sense of security, a sense of protection. You know, we're emerging from this pandemic and also from Brexit, and I think that we really need to look at lessons learned and what sort of safety protections could be brought in. I mean, as has been said, you know, women's rights, there was a huge disparity prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has brought it into sharp focus. So I think now there needs to be renewed vigor to get a Bill of Rights. Now, it's been said many times, but I think that it's so true. You know, once you look after those on the margins of society, then everybody can benefit. A society that prioritizes the rights of its most vulnerable, vital. And we've seen the pandemic. I mean, my day job is with an education trade union, and at the moment we're doing a lot of work with vulnerable children. You know what? I mean, there's traveller families whose children have not returned since the start of the pandemic. And we'd had a Bill of Rights and the rights of the most vulnerable had been prioritised, maybe things would have been different. I'm not saying that it would have necessarily solved it, but you know, it's that concept of putting those on the margins first. And I just want to, I know my time's nearly up, but I just want to close by saying that, as many of you will be aware, the Ad Hoc Committee on a Bill of Rights has a consultation out at the moment, and I know, as is stated in the Feminist Recovery Plan, that you know, there are issues around it in terms of this potentially being another delay tactic, and the fact that you know, clear targets haven't been set in order to achieve a Bill of Rights. But at the same time, you know, I really would encourage everybody to engage and participate in that consultation. It's one of those things that you could probably spend hours filling it in, or you could just spend 10 minutes. And I spent 10 minutes last night. So just in the spirit of participation and trying to do something practical, I think that that is a note that I'd like to end on. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Helena. And we actually have been doing a couple of workshops this week on that consultation, because we did find it a little bit inaccessible for a lot of people. So during January, keep an eye out, because we're going to be trying to do some co-design workshops with other organisations. So hopefully we'll be able to do a specific workshop with people in the women's sector that will focus on women's groups. And I know Siobhan, who's on the call, is working hard at that as well. In terms of renewed campaign around the Bill of Rights as well, I'm just going to steal the privilege of being a chair to paste in an event we're actually holding at 2 p.m. today, because we are relaunching a campaign on the Bill of Rights. But that's enough from me. And although I would also, just like to say that that's so important about it. It's about putting people on the margins first. Like, that's a massive takeaway in terms of what a Bill of Rights could do. I'm now going to introduce Anne-Marie O'Kane. Anne-Marie is the project manager at Border People, which is a website that provides practical information for people crossing the border to live, work, study, or retire. In that work, Anne-Marie has spent the past few years steeped in the consequences of Brexit on people's everyday lives, and has been at the forefront of advocacy and advice to try and ameliorate those impacts. So Anne-Marie is going to talk to us about Brexit. So Anne-Marie, if you'd like to unmute and take the stage. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Helen. It's great to see so many people here today. I live in the sticks. I'm based in Armagh, so I'm hoping that my internet connection works okay for you all. So let's see, I need to share my screen. Rachel, let's have a look, see if I can do this now. Did that work?
Yep.
Yep, great stuff. Okay. There's only a few slides, and I know I'll stick to my 10 minutes. But I would have to agree with Lena that Brexit is a really, really depressing topic. But the majority of our time, I suppose, over the years that I've worked in the project, it's all very much focused on cross-border activity. The border's invisible, people cross the border without even a thought, or it's a bit of an afterthought if it's even that. People see the nearest shop or the nearest school, the nearest job opportunity, the nearest university place, and they just take that opportunity. They move, they cross the border without thinking. But of course, there is implications of that movement across the border. It is going between two European jurisdictions, so people frequently get in touch with us when they need information when things get a wee bit complicated. Now, on that slide, you can see this is just a portion of our website, and the whole project's based around this website. And at the moment, of course, Brexit plays very heavily. It's prominent at the top of the homepage. But for every other day, it's people are clicking the buttons for living across the border, working, studying, or retiring typically. Now, our largest target group would be cross-border workers, and they might come to us looking for information or a few questions about cross-border employment or taxation, access to healthcare and social security. They're always big ones. And Brexit really complicates things to us, because over the years we've always looked towards the EU rules for the answers and the information that people have needed. And Brexit really does change all of that. But it's been going on for a while now. And Brexit has kind of sat in the background almost for the majority of people and for organisations to support people, because the world's kept turning and other things have been thrown our way, other issues have grabbed our attention and our time. We've been dealing with, over the last few years, the complications with welfare reform, rising poverty, housing crisis. Of course, COVID has come running at us this year and completely taken over everything that we've done and how we've done it. Lots of people have gotten in touch with us. The majority of them, I have to say, are women. And lots of questions about what happens with short working hours, unemployment. Unfortunately, redundancy is becoming quite popular on some of our pages on the website. We've had questions as well about the implications of additional and increase in caring responsibilities, childcare options as well, completely disappearing or being severely impacted. So while we've been dealing with these issues, Brexit has been looming there in the background, and we've had these wee niggly worries about changes that are not necessarily going to be for the good where Brexit is concerned in particular, and people have been very worried about a loss of rights. Now, as I mentioned, workers would be our largest target group, and the types of rights that we point people to whenever they have questions about their rights and entitlements, we look to the EU rules. It's the EU that has advanced much of the workers' rights and is behind a lot of the information that we provide. So we're looking at EU pushing for maternity rights, parental leave, part-time workers' rights, equal pay for equal work, protection from gender-based discrimination, and the enhancement of policies and mainstreaming of those policies, gender-based policies. Social security as well is always a big one, and it's been advanced by the EU legislation. Now, previous and current UK government, they've said nothing will change on the 1st of January next year, that those EU rules and regulations have been transposed into UK law that takes effect the 1st of January. And this does provide, I suppose, short-term assurances for us that nothing will change, but we know that future, or even this current government, will be free to change, amend, potentially completely remove current EU standards. And you hear frequently in headlines, a race to the bottom for standards, and that's something that is, of course, a real worry to us in the project, because at the moment we're treating everyone as equal, who come to us, Irish, British, under that EU citizenship umbrella, all treated as equal. Now, of course, we also get questions about specific women's rights and family-focused rights. Lots of questions arise and get very complicated on family breakdown, and frequently people need assistance with family law situations. Maintenance payments as well on a cross-border basis can get very complicated if a partner thinks that they can move across the border and avoid those payments, but there's EU rights and rules that prevent that from happening, but it's still complicated. social security coordination whenever there's a parent living in each jurisdiction or even just working in each jurisdiction can complicate the benefit and the payments of family benefits, and they can really delay them. There's so much red tape around that, but at least the EU rules are there and it will get paid finally. But they do get complicated. Family benefits are always a complicated one for us. And then of course there's also the EU rules that assist with people who are fleeing across the border in the event of domestic violence. Now, you know, frequently these are the types of questions that we very, very quickly signpost out to expert organisations. We don't hold these answers, but we do know that there are rights under the EU rules for individuals facing these things. And, you know, so we'd quickly signpost out to organisations who provide support through family law or children's law. Support organisations are really, really important for these individuals. And then looking into the future, what happens then? So at the end of transition, we lose these EU rights and entitlements. And we really face into Brexit. So we're looking now towards the future deal with the EU. Hopefully that will provide a path for the continuation of dealing with these issues in the future, or a bilateral maybe between the Ireland and the UK that could be needed to fill the gaps. We've also heard that Brexit could be, even for families who are together and all's well, that Brexit is seen as a threat to family life. Under the EU rules, we can move across the border, but we can have our family members with us. We have that right to a family life, and Brexit is said to threaten that, because that automatic entitlement, we lose that. Now we have it at the moment under the EU settlement scheme, but after that we're looking towards the UK's immigration rules, which are complicated to say the least and expensive. So the UK's EU settlement scheme will help to protect some family life, keep them together. So EU citizens who are wishing to continue to live in Northern Ireland after the end of the year will need to apply to the scheme. And then there are family members from other places outside the EU, they can apply as well. And then that will avoid the UK immigration system for them. And EU citizens who are entitled in their own right to apply. And we know that through Emma D'Souza's case and Jake's case that there's been new rules specific to Northern Ireland, that Irish and British, the family members of Irish and British from Northern Ireland, their family members from other places will also be entitled to the scheme. And it's great to have it, but the scheme is a bit of a sticking plaster really, because it runs out at the end of June next year. And the free movement of those individuals moving here will have to, for the majority of people, they'll have to be here by the 31st of December. And the scheme does close at the end of June, and then the domestic rules that are complicated, that are expensive, you know, they'll apply then, which is horrendous for a lot of families. It'll be difficult for them to stay together. Now, I don't mean to sound like the settlement scheme is, you know, is all rosy. It is complicated for some people and complex for many too. And some reports would suggest that vulnerable groups may actually struggle to complete the process. Victims of domestic violence, modern slavery, people living in poverty, those with jobs that are informal or precarious, or people who have who will struggle to provide evidence that they have a relationship to a qualifying EU citizen, which is a bit of a worry as well. So the settlement scheme isn't perfect. It does have its own problems, but it is better than the UK's immigration rules, which can make spouses very dependent and very vulnerable through that scheme. So looking into next year, we would worry about keeping pace with EU policies. And to give you an example of a directive that hasn't been implemented here, you know, if all of these rules have been transposed into UK and nothing will change on the 1st of January, what if there's a change made in Europe on the 1st of January? Will we move on with it? So an example of a policy that we might get left behind, the EU directive for a work-life balance, and that looks to increase participation in the labour market for women, that it increases the likelihood of the chances of getting flexible working arrangements and some leave for carers, actual statutory leave for some carers. It's only small, but it could be the start of something bigger. So we would worry about not keeping pace, and the UK's current unwillingness to agree to that level playing field at the minute might give us a bit of an inkling for the future intention. Now, Northern Ireland's a wee bit different, thankfully, for once, because we have the Northern Ireland Protocol. So it's part of the withdrawal agreement, and it stands no matter what happens at the end of this week or the end of Sunday evening, when we hear if there's a deal or a no deal scenario. The protocol will be implemented, and it should shield us in some ways. And it really looks to protect the unique circumstances of this island, to keep the island running, that there will be no hard border, there'll be no diminution of rights as set out in the Good Friday Agreement, North-South cooperation, it'll be protected, and then the continuation of the common travel area, and our lights won't go out, they'll protect the single market for electricity. So it's a non-regression of labour and social standards that its mention is really, really important for us when we think about keeping pace with the EU rules. Now, it'll be implemented, but somebody has to oversee it. So we have the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission and the Equality Commission as the dedicated mechanism for oversight to make sure that the UK government does stick to that promise of no diminution of rights, safeguards and equality that's mentioned in the Good Friday Agreement as a result of the UK leaving, as a result of Brexit, that our rights in some areas would be protected. So the Good Friday Agreement specifically mentions equality of opportunity in all social and economic activity, regardless of class, creed, disability, gender or ethnicity. So this is really, really important, and we're probably looking towards equal treatment continuing in lines with employment, access to goods, services, social security. So these are really important. We might differ a bit though from other parts of the UK, and that's going to create other problems, of course. And I'm almost finished now. In fact, this is the main last slide. So all of this is around Brexit and with all the changes with Brexit, but the withdrawal agreement won't impact everyone. And my real fear is through the project that people won't know where to find their rights. They're going to be scattered all over the place. And the withdrawal agreement, we're looking at EU, British, Irish, cross-border workers, people who have already moved here by the end of the year. They'll be protected within the withdrawal agreement. Then we'll have additional rights for Irish and British under the common travel area rules. But our friends and family from other places won't have any rights and entitlements under the common travel area. Then we mentioned the Good Friday Agreement and that linking in with the withdrawal agreement. But of course, not everybody here in Northern Ireland is part of that category of people of Northern Ireland under the Good Friday Agreement rights. So that complicates things. And then of course, God knows what's going to happen, but we'll have a better idea at the end of this week maybe of the new deal that might happen between the UK and the EU. And then we know already of the new rules for immigration and visa requirements for working from the UK. And they're specific more or less to the EU citizens. So it's confusion about the rights and where they're going to be found. That's the thing that's worrying me, and it's complicating things a lot with the project. We would worry that if people don't know where their rights are, they're going to miss out on opportunities. They're going to they're not going to engage their rights, and potentially that could lead to exploitation if people don't know where their rights are. So access to information, support from the organisations like the organisations here today with us, it's going to be really, really important. And I think this is finding our rights looking into next year is going to be one of the main problems, I think. But that is really depressing, and I'm really sorry about it, but it's where we are at the moment. So that's our website, and you can take a look at it. There's plenty of information, lots for frontier workers today. The Frontier Worker Scheme is launched today from the UK government. So there's lots of information there, and I hope that gives you a flavour. So I'll stop sharing now.
Anne-Marie, can I just ask, we've got a question here about whether we could share the slides.
Yeah, surely, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll coordinate that then. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. That was wonderful. But yeah, I mean, it's a worrying time. But one thing that has always given me a kind of comfort throughout all this process is that there are people like Anne-Marie working for organizations like Border Studies, or that just has really, you know, it's given me comfort. I'm actually going to paste the link it's Border People in the Centre for Cross-Border Studies. I'm going to post the link to the 2017 journal, because there was a paper by Louise Kennedy, who at the time was from Women's Aid Federation. The Centre for Cross-Border Studies journals released every year. They're incredible. They've been a lot about Brexit and rights, but I remember the Louise Kennedy one just being fantastic on some of those issues that Anne-Marie was talking about in terms of specifically for women. And then I'm going to introduce our final speaker for today. That is Una Monaghan, who is from the Northern Ireland Women's European Platform. NIWEP is an organisation that works to make sure that the views and priorities of women in Northern Ireland are heard within the review mechanisms of international human rights treaties and international networks. Una not only works to ensure the experiences of women in Northern Ireland are heard at levels such as the UN and the EU by leading on reviews such as CEDAW, but also advocates for the implementation of international standards in domestic law, including by providing Secretariat support to the all-party group on UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. So I am absolutely delighted to welcome the last of our fantastic speakers. So Una.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thank you so much for inviting us to speak, and thanks for doing the job of introducing NIWEP. So I don't have to do that. In a nutshell, what I usually say is that NIWEP acts as the link between the women's sector in Northern Ireland and the European and the international level. So we work with we're a member organization, so we work with our members and partners to share evidence and try and make it heard at the international level. And one of the main things we do is we coordinate the shadow civil society report to CEDAW. And Helen had asked me to talk a little bit about international standards and how they link to the Bill of Rights and to Brexit. So I thought I will just talk, CEDAW is the one that comes to mind, and then I'll talk a little bit about UN Security Resolution 1325, as well as the two main ones that are above all relevant to this. So I think most people will be fairly familiar with CEDAW, but just by way of a quick context, CEDAW, or its full name, is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, is one of the international human rights treaties that form the basis of international law, which obviously flows from the International Declaration of Human Rights, and it's quite often known as the Bill of Rights for Women. So, the link is aptly made there. It was signed in '79, and the UK ratified it in 1986. So, in that sense, the provisions in CEDAW are binding on the UK. And one of the ways you could look at it is that, things like work-life balance, we don't, well, the Brexit issue is a massive concern. The UK has already signed up to things like promoting work-life balance through CEDAW, because what it does is sets out an agenda for equality in law, and it covers most areas of women's lives, anything from employment and health issues, right to nationality, to rights within the family. And, of course, things have changed hugely since 1979. And the CEDAW committee, which is a group of experts that focus on how CEDAW is being implemented, and they examine countries. So countries have to formally submit reports on progress. They, for example, have recognized that there's much more that they can be done on intersectionality. But in many ways, CEDAW is still ambitious because it talks about full equality. So women having the same access to employment, same benefits, and childcare is included within that. Girls having the same right to education, and the same standard of education, access to all the same subjects, full health and reproductive rights, and so on. So, I think that's one thing and one of the values of CEDAW, because with all the UN treaties, they really are as good as their implementation. And where civil society comes in is that it's about using it in advocacy and just keeping it on the agenda, because the more government and policymakers hear about it's harder it is to ignore it. So, you know, the major case study that proves that point is, of course, the inquiry into abortion law in Northern Ireland under the optional protocol. You know, so I don't need to reiterate the whole story, but the inquiry took a very long time. It's one of the first to be taken. So it was started in 2010, and NIWEP, along with Alliance for Choice and the Family Planning Associations, were the organizations that instigated it. But eventually the report in 2018 found that the legislation is a breach of women's human rights. And then that report subsequently obviously was fundamental in achieving the legal change. And again, there's much more work to be done there, but it's an example of how by keeping it up there, it can be used to achieve change. And civil society actually can play quite a strong role. So as I said, countries are being examined. It's roughly every 4 years. You have to go to Geneva and present a report on what you've done. And civil society can provide their own evidence to sort of challenge what the government is presenting or give their own perspectives. So NIWEP, as I said, we work with our members and partners to coordinate the shadow report. And we were then at the examination in Geneva. Actually, Louise Kennedy, who's one of our board members, was there for us. And one of the things that is highlighted in the most recent concluding observations is around an impact assessment of Brexit on women's rights, actions to mitigate any harms identified. And that was originally, we didn't think that the committee would take up on Brexit at all, because they don't tend to get involved with what might be seen as domestic politics. But all of us, you know, because it's for civil society from all 4 nations, made the point that there are serious concerns around it. So they did make that recommendation. And we're at the minute just doing an interim report to CEDAW, and unfortunately, you know, there hasn't been much progress to report. But again, you know, that just goes to show that we need to keep pressure up, and even more so, you know, in the coming months, whatever shape things take after Sunday. And the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 is a bit different. It's not a treaty, so it's a resolution, but resolutions by the Security Council are binding on member states. And 1325 was a landmark. At its time, it was adopted in 2000, because for the first time it recognized women's role in peace building, and also that the gendered impacts of conflict that women suffer specifically in conflict. And it builds on 4 pillars: prevention, protection, and participation. And the 4th one is recovery. So the critical part of that, it's about women participating in peace building in a sustainable way. And again, progress has been slow worldwide. So 1325, it's the 20th anniversary. So there's been a lot of work done to highlight that on a global scale. And in the UK, there's the specific issue that they say that the principles of 1325 apply in Northern Ireland, but not 1325 in itself. But there are other things that can be done. So for example, Ireland's National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security does now take an all-island focus. And that's a tool in itself where you can highlight it, because under 1325, UN member states are expected to do a national action plan on women, peace and security. And that's again something that civil society can push for and highlight. So the UK's national action plan is completely focused overseas, but there are increasingly countries that are taking a domestic element. So Ireland is one, Canada is another. And there's the key issue there really is it's about women's participation fundamentally. And as Helen said at the start, we provided secretariat to an all-party group in the Assembly on, that's the longest name in the history of all-party groups, because it's the all-party group on UN Security Council Resolution 1325, Women, Peace and Security. But they have they are very interested in not just in CEDAW, but in other issues such as gender budgeting. And they've been very active this year on the Feminist Recovery Plan. And they are, working with the sector to raise questions of why is there not more being done to make sure women's needs are heard in the recovery and in the response in general. So I think, I've said that the main things start to be, but the point is that there is an international framework that we can use, and that the UK is bound by in different ways. Whether or not we're part of the EU, we're still part, at this point in time, part of those international human rights networks, and keeping that in mind will be more important than ever, and hopefully, can be used. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you for that overview of those kind of international standards that are there and help to protect us, and can feel at times, I think, a little distant, but it's so important, therefore, the work that NIWEP do and other groups, but NIWEP are that main kind of link to ensure that these rights are being brought home and that we're demanding to see them at home. If anybody has any comments or questions, if you just pop them into the chat box, that would be fantastic. We have probably about 10 minutes because we do want to wrap this up by 11. Just while I'm waiting for anybody, I just want to let you know we are going to send an email after the event that will have all the resources in it that have been mentioned in this, and also Anne-Marie's agreed there to share her slides. In addition to that, WRDA are going to send in the email a short evaluation form just to help figure out what people would like to see in future webinars. So if you could take a few minutes to fill that in, it would be really helpful. I'm not seeing any questions yet, so I might take chair's privilege and ask one. And it's probably mainly to Yona, but I think it's to everybody. And that question is about just, you mentioned 1325, the all-party group, and I know that they've been really great actually as a way to get the Feminist Recovery Plan out there. And if I'm not wrong, it was through the involvement in that all-party parliamentary group that you were able to get the First Minister and Deputy First Minister on record to respond. So to the Feminist Recovery Plan directly. So I'm just wondering from all the speakers, if we could talk a little bit about that way, that there's many levels and many different ways of getting our rights enforced, and just kind of maybe give us a snapshot into some of that.
Yeah, so if I just quickly start off. So yeah, it was through the all-party group. So Mike Nesbitt is one of the members on the all-party group. Paula Bradley is the chair. Mike raised a question in assembly to both the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister about what, are they taking that into account, and they both are on record to say that they will work with us. So we are going back to them on that, and we're working as well at the minute on a series of questions to all ministers, really around specific issues within the Feminist Recovery Plan, how they're going to take those into account. We're working with Rachel in the Women's Policy Group on that. And one thing, sorry, won't hog the floor any longer, but there are other things. So the APG in 2014 worked on an inquiry on how the principles of 1325 are being implemented in Northern Ireland, and that was with the all-party parliamentary group on women, peace and security in Westminster. So those links exist as well, and they can make links actually with with the IRF as well, and have done.
Thank you so much. And Anne-Marie or Helena, do you want to jump in on that, just about the different complex ways that we can enforce our rights, like while we wait for our Bill of Rights and while we continue to demand?
I'll jump in there if that's okay. I think what we're finding is there's going to be a real need for engagement going into next year, because so far we haven't known the shape of Brexit. We don't really know what the implications, the practical day-to-day implications. All of the conversations that are happening are way up there at a high policy level, where we need the nitty-gritty, the practical, how's it going to affect my life, that level of detail. And I think it'll be organisations like ourselves that will start to, I can spot to see the problems and the issues. How's that going to be implemented? And I think it's going to be really important for groups like this to raise their concerns proactive, rather. I think we're probably going to be reacting a lot of the time next year to things that have happened. But if we can kind of keep pace with that and maybe keep one step ahead, it will be great. But it's having opportunities to engage that's the problem. And finding a place where we have a platform, a forum to actually engage and to be heard, I think is going to be absolutely crucial. Now, we've had lots of engagement through, we have an ad hoc group for cross-border business organisations who have some foot on each side of the border, some interest in collaboration and cooperation. And it's really important that we engage with groups like that come into to commit. They're within reach of people who are making these new policies that are going to flood us next year. There's going to be a lot of change, so impacting the policies before they actually hit the ground next year is going to be really important. So it's how to engage, and we keep asking that question every time we meet somebody from the Cabinet Office or the Southern Government or somebody in the Assembly. Give us a chance to engage. We'll put you on the right path for implementing these policies, taking them from up high and actually implementing them on the ground. That's where we are, maybe part.
Yeah, and if I can just come in there, just to say, obviously, you've talked about the joint mechanism there between like the Equality Commission and the Human Rights Commission. And as I was saying, I was a former commissioner. My term came to an end at the end of August there. But just, they've obviously got a statutory obligation there. And I think it's so important, just what you're saying, to for them to listen to civil society and to engage with yourselves. I know from the Commission, obviously it's got a statutory obligation to protect and safeguard rights, and they have suffered from massive budgetary issues, like a lot of organisations have recently, which I think has limited some of the outreach and engagement that they can do. But certainly when I was there, I think we really saw the community engagement work as being so important. And I suppose I would just just encourage reaching out to them, and I know there's maybe, I think one of the colleagues from the commissions in this discussion, but there is that mechanism there, and they really are going to need an awful lot of guidance and an awful lot of direction from what's happening on the ground. So that's me.
And then we are just about out of time. So what I sometimes like to do, I'm getting a lot of thanks to all the speakers from participants. So, and yeah, I would just like to echo that. Thank you so much for giving up your time to be with us today on International Human Rights Day. 30-second comment from each of you about, what we can do or what we should do or what to look out for. Just. Do we want to do it, Helena, Anne-Marie, and then Yona, the same?
Yep, sure. Yes, I think just being engaged, trying. I mean, there's all these. I know it can be quite a depressing thing, and it can be quite bleak. But just to retain some element of hope, I think we all need to do that. And I think the fact that there are these obligations, that there are mechanisms, there are these amazing, excellent groups that are campaigning. The consortium obviously is one, and just to engage and to not completely lose hope.
I completely agree with that. I think if we were going to maybe turn it around and maybe put a positive on it, at least with Brexit now, it's taken the Good Friday Agreement off the top shelf, all dusty, and has opened it back up again and has shone a light on it. There's probably a generation of people coming through now that didn't know very much about it. And so we're all talking now again about the Bill of Rights, that, okay, it should have been implemented by now, but at least it's back on the agenda and getting lots of attention at the moment. So I suppose, you know, it does, at least it's done that, and we do have the protocol. So, you know, we will be protected in a way from lots of the impacts that will be felt maybe a bit harder over in England, Scotland and Wales. So there is that positive to it as well.
Yeah, and I would just completely agree with all of that. The only thing I would add, and I think I see that in the comments as well, is that it's really important that we work together. And you know, we don't agree on all things, but there's so many key things that we can work together on, and that's one of the good things. If there's anything good about COVID, is that I think it has helped bring us together through the Feminist Recovery Plan, and even before then, you know, to really push for these things. So hopefully, you know, we can keep working on that, and we can hopefully not be ignored anymore.
Thank you all so much for that. Thank you to all our participants. I was just delighted when our 3 speakers agreed to take part, and I just think they're absolutely excellent. Thank you also so much to Rachel, because as you know, co-organised events can be a bit tricky at times, but Rachel is, as always, an absolute dream to work with. So thank you all. I hope you can enjoy some more of the Human Rights Festival events, and happy Human Rights Day to everyone.
Thank you for chairing, Helen. Thank you so much, everyone. The recording of this will be available on the WRDI website too, in case you want to go back to any of it.